this transformation, soul transformation, this hero's journey, that's one of the central topics for myself. But what makes me most happy is actually the journey to going inside. I can say, and also looking forward. I'm so happy about it because it's like an adventure. Waking up every day.
Becoming Fully Alive, the Deep Listening Podcast. Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to the 5th episode of Becoming Fully Alive, your podcast for mindful leadership, clean eating, fitness, and how to chill out properly and regenerate. As always in this podcast, I want to take you on a journey into a holistic way of personal development and health, where we get our head around strengthening our life forces to become more successful and more in tune with life in general. Today is really special for me because for the very first time I will be hosting this podcast in English, and I always wanted to have international guests on the show. And the reason why I'm starting it right now is that I have a really special guest with me. A warm-hearted welcome to my podcast, Becoming Fully Alive, Henning Bensland.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Henning, before we start, let's take our listeners into the scenario we are surrounded with right now. We are in the beautiful Balears in Mallorca, down in the southeast of the island, in an old town called Santanyí, where you and your wife Petra have created a beautiful oasis. The holistic retreat hotel named Karriere, which, when I'm remembering right, means little king in the local language Mallorquin. The only thing I can say is that this place is definitely worth checking out if you are in Mallorca and if you are into yoga, meditation, clean eating, spa and so forth. And if you want to relax and maybe also find yourself again. It's a breathtaking resort, and the people here are super friendly and warm-hearted. But let's start our conversation and dive into your life story, Henning. When me and you met for the very first time here in Mallorca a few years ago, our encounter felt straight away very deep and full of wisdom to me, and it was just exciting to talk to each other. What I can say is that your life story is something very special, and dear listeners, you will soon experience how dramatic, deep and also full of joy Henning's story is. So Henning, let's embark into our conversation and journey right here and now. You are not Spanish, you are born and raised in Sweden. So how was it for you growing up in Sweden? What is your background?
Yeah, this is a short and long story. I grew up outside Stockholm, and it was in a, I would say, quite bourgeois environment, what meant that there's certain ways how to behave and do and think, and that had made my conditioning. On the same time, I had a family which was very open and playful. So we were doing different kind of adventures every day. And growing up in the archipelago, there are lots of water, islands. We had lots of fun, I would say. And then going to gymnasium, then continuing studying, I started to change my perspectives from really being very innocent and open-minded to be focused like lots of men and women young are, wanting to prove myself. And I thought at that time was creating certain materialistic values, money and success.
If you were particularly motivated by money and materialistic values and success at the time, what sort of educational path did you choose for yourself to make sure you can somehow follow up on your dreams? I mean, I know that you were enrolled at the Harvard Business School in Cambridge, near Boston for a while. So, what was your further educational journey?
Then I studied engineering and also business in Stockholm. And later on, I studied also business in US. I found that in my studies that this was not really what I wanted, but I couldn't say no to this, and that created two depressions, one in 23 and one 25. But my way of solving this was to run, and run away from the problems. And that was my way of healing it. I could feel that there were only two ways of feeling sober when I was depressed, because it was like iron cast around my head. And one way was to drink alcohol. What I understood, that's not my solution, will not help in the long run. And the other way was to run, and that creates endorphins and well-being. So then I could have a certain number of hours after having this headache and hard pressure on my head. I could have a few hours of feeling normal. And then I understood the direction I want to go. And then I just continued to run even more every day. That was the base of healing my depressions. And also, of course, in combination with other things like talking a lot to my friends, and also finding other stress-reducing methods. But the basic thing I didn't change. It was more or less doing something that I didn't really like.
Henning, thank you so much for your great openness right in the beginning of our conversation. For me, hearing your story is very touching to me, because I can somehow imagine how it must have felt for you being in such an educational system and environment, feeling unhappy and being depressed. I mean, it's not easy when you're young, trying to find yourself and trying to give your own life a direction or a deeper meaning. I think it's still very hard for young people, even today in our educational system, to do so. So, Henning, if we look a little further into your biography, how was your career developing after you left university?
I understood that creating new firms, employing people, and developing something that suits me very much, in combination with also creating a certain value. That was my conditioning. So I thought, let's go in this direction. And I was working in telecommunication, and the company I worked for went into bankruptcy. So I got in contact with certain persons, and we started this joint venture purchasing debts in Central Eastern Europe. And this was a bit of an experiment in the beginning, but it works very well, because Eastern Europe, they didn't have practice or experience of credits. So our business expanded very quickly, and I moved the family very soon to Czech Republic, Poland, and we expanded to other countries as well. In the beginning, it was a little bit like a ketchup bottle. You shake, and nothing comes, and then suddenly everything flows. And then I got into this flow of building businesses. So after certain number of years, we were like 1,100 people, and I was feeling very good in a way. I was going with the flow, so that was very, very nice. On the other hand, every business, when it grows, at a certain point it becomes more and more about figures, and then also the pressure reaching certain figures is more But that then actually going down to the floor and talk to the people, and I got detached, I would say. And in that environment, suddenly I thought to myself, when I was out jogging, I could lift my left leg worse and worse. I thought, here's something going on. I had to check it out. And I went to the University Hospital in Zurich for a couple of days to check out what it was. And coming out then, they told me you have MS, multiplis sclerosis. And my version, there was no available medicines. The doctor prescribed me the professor prescribed me some immune suppressive. And that's how they were treating MS at that time. Coming out of this diagnosis, even I understood that, okay, this is not really a good future. And the stigmatization of the disease was probably the worst, because the disease itself didn't say anything to me, really. But the stigma, for sure, that visualizing myself, not just sitting walking around with a stick, but sitting in a wheelchair, and then even worse than that, die too early, actually. So of course that was a big stigmatization, and coming out from the hospital, my wife picked me up and she started to cry, and then I understood, okay, this is serious. This is really serious. And I went to some other doctor specialists, but it was the same message. And there was nothing to do, really.
There must have been a lot of inner pain, uncertainties, and future anxieties when I'm listening to your story and what you just have said. Thank you for sharing your inner thoughts and feelings here with us. When I try to sense your situation at a time, I see a man who is very successful in business, who cares deeply about entrepreneurial goals, and at the same time feels more and more distanced from his own employees. And then this diagnosis breaks into your life and stops everything. Total shock. Everything, your entire life plan is in question. How did you deal with your inner alignment, having such a high energy as an entrepreneur, and then suddenly questioning everything? I mean, what was your answer to your life situation at the time?
So I had a few cracks, like everyone, but then suddenly it was much more than cracks. The ship was sinking. So for sure, I understood, okay, I cannot wait too long, because then it's going to be too late. I read a book by the name of To Feel Bad is a Good Beginning. And for me, it was a good way of waking up, actually. I understood also feeling really, really bad is not the end of the story necessarily. Mostly, it's actually maybe beginning of a new adventure. So for me, I can truly say that was the case for myself. So I went up to Sweden, and we did lots of crazy exercises, and the theory was simply to empty all psychological blockages that all people have, myself much more. It was everything is stored in the body, all kinds of traumas, what you have, small, larger, and also unpleasant experiences stored in the body, and you can actually work with it. And I did primal therapy, Gestalt therapy and lots of other different therapies. And I could see, wow, this is exciting. It moves something. So I continued this for 2 years. It was education. And before I started, then the leader said, who was 80 years old, he told me one thing is that you maybe could heal yourself or become better, or at least you could do something for your kids. And of course, it was stressful for the whole family. So I thought he has a very good point. So I started this education, going up to Sweden very frequently. And I could see that I felt much better. Or it was like a new sky opened up for myself. And I could see it on the MRI pictures, what I had to do every year, that it also improved. So I understood that to work with the psyche was for me extremely important.
This form of mind-body medicine you just described, what were the effects on your life in particular? I mean, it's quite remarkable when you say the results of the MRI scans changing positively and you could see which direction you need to go and work onto in order to slow down the MS flare-ups. How did you feel at that time? What has changed in the further course?
Yes, it calmed me down for sure. That's one thing, but it made me more happy on the other side. So it was a combination of these two. Becoming happier, that was something new for me, because when you're very involved in a business, you don't think very much. And I had a young family. It was also very busy, so it was not very much time of enjoying life, so to say. It was more about doing and not being. So this was the start of the journey. And myself, I have quite tendency to work in concept, and I can very apply a certain concept and in a way believe in it, but it doesn't necessarily work very much. So the embodiment, the really involve everything in my body and psyche and mindfulness, awareness, created a holistic well-being, I would say. Not from day one, and it would very much be like being out on the sea. I would say, now I understood everything, but then comes a storm or worse weather, and that changes the situation again. Then you understand, no, I have not really understood very much. So retry and redirect, develop, reinvent constantly since 15 years back, more or less, I would say. And there are certain different milestones on this trip. But now sitting here 15 years later, I could say that not only I feel more relaxed, more aware of everything. I would say I can honestly say that I'm more happy than I was 15 years ago. For me, I would say the inner journey has been extremely fulfilling, and every day now is a new adventure.
For me, this sounds just incredible. I mean, you have worked intensively with yourself, on your psyche, with your body, with meditation, with all these different ways of healing for over 15 years now, facing a disease like multiple sclerosis, which is a really heavy disease. I know so, and I can talk about this because I cared for people with MS during my community service, or the civil service, we say in Germany. So I can truly say how difficult and sad this disease can be. I find it really extraordinary how you have faced your dreadful life situation. How did your personal healing journey look like?
I visited so many locations and healers and trying out different methods, and visiting shamans in Peru, visiting healers in Mexico, visiting healers and shamans in Chile, going to nature doctors in Germany, trying new methods of integrative medicine. Everything from energy healing to infusions of vitamins and orthomolecular medicine. So there are hundreds of different methods out there. And I understood that maybe every method has a certain profile and suits better for certain persons, and you cannot really tell before trying it. So I became my own researcher, trying to see what could work for myself.
According to your descriptions, it sounds like a super challenging, but at the same time somehow exciting and deep and real intense journey. Henning, what would you say really worked for you in the end? What were the areas of development and healing for yourself that really supported you on your healing journey?
I would probably define myself as quite sensitive person, but trying to be not sensitive, trying to go through the normal challenges, what people are supposed to do. Saying that now maybe sounds ridiculous, but now I just turned 60, and 40 years ago it was a different set. And in my environment it was quite clear that I do certain things. So the psyche had probably the biggest impact on myself. And then, of course, the body impact doing different healing methods had a great impact. Then the different physical trainings and therapies had also, for sure, has a great impact and still has for myself. And also the nutritions. That was an additional thing. For example, to withdraw from certain things like gut health and making analysis. You always have certain strengths and weaknesses. And in my case, it was like gluten, it was like milk products, it was like sugar. So that had an impact. Also other nutritions. To add certain nutritions, to take away certain nutrition. So in the end, I could see for myself what works the best is not just one single way. But what makes me most happy is actually the journey to going inside. I can say, and also looking forward. I'm so happy about it because it's like an adventure. Waking up every day to do this hero's journey is probably summarize. You have the big hero's journey, and then I nearly survived, but I did somehow. And then you have short daily or monthly or yearly hero's journeys. And then I experienced very soon that to let go and surrender and even die in a way, simulate dying. But you have to believe in that you're dying because otherwise it's not authentic. So really going through that process, that means that your whole nervous system, your whole being goes through a transformation. And what is exciting, I think, is that after the dying, there's a stillness and there's an emptiness that just comes from nowhere. And then out of this stillness comes love. And it's so easy to say, but to really experience that. And then also from that base comes creativity and wanting to change something and do something also physically. But this transformation, soul transformation, this hero's journey, that's one of the central topics for myself. And I see that I have 3 children. Now they are 26, 24 and 19. And I can see how important that is for them, being in that age. And I know that being very young, it's the same. It's always important to have that metaphor as something that reminds you. I believe it's like a big present.
All I can say right now, Henning, is thank you for what you just shared with me and us right here in the last minutes. That was deeply touching for me. Let's go a little further into the concrete practice and thus access the experience of what you just described. What I can say from the perspective of my own experience is that by developing more awareness of what is going on in my field of consciousness, I'm becoming more and more awake, and I'm getting more and more able to really guide myself better in the context of my patterns and habits in my daily life. So what were your experiences to really access the field of consciousness?
I can say one thing. What I experienced is going to these different seminars, that the first 3 days, my body and my mind, we are fighting against everything. And my unconscious does not want to be there, or my conscious does not want to be there. So I'm trying to stop everything. Then I see that suddenly it's like a key hole where you put the key. It's so small, and I try to press myself in there. It's not possible, and suddenly it just flows through. And that's the moment after fighting against it. Just go with the flow, and then a new dimension opens up. So this is something very strong, and it's always the same thing for myself, experiencing this flow. And I ask myself, how could I forget it?
Yes, how can we forget that? I really like the way you just have described that, and I fully agree with you here. It's such a beautiful experience when you enter this state of flow. Very interesting. And dear listeners, something that worth seeking for if you are really interested in inner development and becoming fully alive in the end. In my experience, this transition between the known and the unknown is often fraught with anxiety. So, Henning, let's talk about fear. How do you face your fears? I mean, having MS, fear will have played a big role again and again, right?
First of all, we had in the family, I'm half German, and my mother, she was in Leipzig and was like 40 years old when the bombs were falling, not every night, but that created big fear. And for my father's family, there were other kind of fears. And so I was grown up with this. They say epigenetically it can survive 7 generations. And for sure, I had a certain amount of fear. And that can be also positive. It can make you do certain things that create energy. But then at a certain stage, it becomes more negative than positive. So I think this fear was there unconscious all the time. And I tried to behave like I didn't see it or feel it, but it was there all the time. And at some point then, when I had my first depression, I was too weak, and then everything came out. And that was really not pleasant. It went so far that I had walked up in a building, and I really had to hold myself from not jumping when I came into a room, opening the window and jumping out. So it was like I was on hyper arousal, like traumatized, I would say, in a way. So I know how it is to have the fear breathing in your neck. It's not so pleasant. But during this journey, I have learned to be not just to accept the fear, to become a friend of the fear, but to even say that I can love my fear. That I cannot for sure always say, but most of the time, because it's like a source of energy for myself.
Okay, but how are you dealing with your fear?
I would say my fear comes out when I'm not prepared, in anxiety. And then I can feel, for example, I could get a sickness, a normal sickness, and then because of my nerve system is weaker, firstly, start there, and then I couldn't move a leg, for example. Then the anxiety would come very strongly. And then, of course, you ask, so what to do now? Because you can, from scale 1 to 10, from maybe 1 or 2 maximum, then suddenly you come to 5, 6, and it increases. And maybe I woke up in the night feeling, wow, this is not fun. And then what I saw for myself is that breathing works very well for myself. Then it, as maybe everyone knows, the connection to the vagus nerve, that slows the system down. So that had a great impact on my being.
Were the breathing exercises you practiced yoga exercises? I know that Petra, your wife, is a well-known yoga teacher. So was yoga the approach for you into breathing?
Coming back to my wife, her experience, she's a yoga teacher, and that was her way of dealing with my diagnosis. And I could also, of course, learn from her. And the yoga tradition is great. It's not just doing some physical asanas. There are different aspects of yoga. And the one that worked very well for me was to do the pranayama. And particularly one exercise, Shitali. And that's a particular form from breathing. It entails the hero's journey. You create friction, you have to let go, and you have to then slow down the system and come into a different rhythm. It changed my pulse. And I have done it now for the last 3 years. I have done the practice every day before I go to bed. That is probably one of my lessons from these 15 years, is that you have to create some kind of practice. And if you do that regularly, it can be 5 minutes or it can be whatever, half an hour, depending on your situation. But it has a quite large impact long-term wise. So this may be in short-term subtle impact. Long-term, it can move mountains. So I do that every night, the breathing exercise, but I also do what is called positive psychology, what is taken from the religions, the different ideas of, for example, forgiveness for myself, forgiveness for everyone else, and also gratitude, and then the meditation also has an impact. So I've created my own program And what I also see is that I have to change my program every now and then.
I think what you just have said and described is very interesting, Henning. It's about creating your own curriculum for your personal development and life. It's about the freedom to choose and create your very own practice. What would you say is key to fit into an own set of practices?
I think a key experience for me is to take responsibility for your own healing. That's number one, meaning that you're going to be on a journey, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, but to take responsibility and not being disappointed by someone, by the doctor, the school medicine doctor, or some other NG healer, that they cannot heal you, being dissatisfied, suffering, and feel sorry for yourself. You have to take your responsibility and go down to the root cause and not just heal the symptom. If you heal a symptom, then it comes out somewhere else. Investigate with your friends and on the internet, and talk to doctors and talk to your network. Everyone has a network to start out from, and then you have to start to go on your journey. And for me, it opened many new doors, and often you have to close some doors in order to open up new doors. And sometimes I don't want to close doors, but sometimes I understand now I have to make a choice, A or B. And if it's clear what I should do, then it's easy. But if it's 50-50, you do the pros and cons and come up with, I don't really know. Then I have decided myself, I have that as a life strategy, then I jump. I go into the unknown.
Going or jumping into the unknown. What a beautiful image. Henning, for me, this also means the deconstruction or liberation of the ego, or having the courage not to know what's coming up next. Going into the experience and letting go of certainties, for example. How would you describe it, Henning? What is the unknown for you?
It's really scary that you have to give up certain habits that you get comfortable with, even though you understand that it's not a solution for the long run. The whole body refuses to go into certain exercises. And I was, and I'm still, maybe in a way, afraid of dying. And I had a strong ego. I have understood, and I try to understand it on a daily basis, to accept my ego, but also to be more aware. And by being aware, being mindful, then the ego becomes less obvious, and then it becomes less dominant. And in the end, also becoming more aware of my, for example, emotions, like greed, like anger, like proudness, like being jealous, all these basic emotions, also becoming more aware by using the senses, creating overall higher awareness that makes the ego, my ego, less dominant. But the ego is something I'm going to have to live with all my life. I have chosen not to live in a monastery, and I respect those who choose that path a lot, but it's not my path. I would like to integrate with the people, with the families, with my friends, and all the normal problems what we face every day, and as a family, as a community member. and as doing a business as well.
Henning, our conversation has been and is really beautiful, deep and somehow encouraging. I would like to bring up one more aspect that I found truly amazing about your story. You recently received the diagnosis that your multiple sclerosis has been stopped and that you are healed. For me, this sounds somehow like a miracle because I know that this disease is usually incurable. For me, listening to your healing journey is an incredible inspiration of dealing with health issues. So, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And for sure, I would love to say that everything is perfect. But during this process of getting something, having a big challenge, you'd also develop certain excuses for not doing certain things that I know maybe I should. And I think for sure it's more positive than negative, but I would like to continue with my practice and develop the consciousness. I think that's a new horizon that has opened up for me. So I would like to go there, and exactly where it ends up, I don't really know. I'm very excited about it. And the excuses, you become also with age more comfortable. One thing is my body, but one thing is also experiencing new areas that I have not seen before. So I have great excitement about every day I wake up now.
Henning, thank you very much. I have one last question for you. What sort of advice would you give to young people if they want to actively deal with their biography and want to shape it?
Exploring the truth. Everyone has a different truth. I would say that it's a journey to find your truth. To be more authentic, to be more true, is actually lots of layers of truth that you have to work through. So I would say find your own truth.
Dear listeners, I don't know how you feel after listening to Henning Bensland right now, but I feel so excited and encouraged by Henning's stories and descriptions that all I can say is start and create your own curriculum for your personal development, your health and healing. Dear Henning, thank you very, very much for joining me on the podcast today and for your great openness talking about your healing journey and biography. It was such a great pleasure for me, and I'm even more excited now to our next encounters in the near future. Finally, it only remains for me to say thank you for your attention. Many thanks also to Made Vision for the technical implementation, and special thanks to my esteemed colleague, audio engineer and composer Oliver Doiling. Hopefully, I see you all back on the next episode of Becoming Fully Alive. Until then, stay clear, conscious and healthy. Bye bye, I'm out.